Okay, so this is the Drupal usability meeting for December the 20th, 2016. And we discussed that we want to cover our workflow UI with outside in and without outside in, I guess, the media metadata mapping UI and the media library. So I think workflow UI was the first. So let's start with that.
Right. So I got a few things, but let's start with the most important. Let me share my screen. Okay. So one of the things which we've been working on is the concept of workspace. I think most of you are familiar with that. Some of you have seen already the wireframes. So these are designs which were made according to the wireframes. And so there were a few goals. One was to be able to switch between workspaces, and then to update, check for conflicts between the two workspaces, and then deploy. And so I would say a non-outside-in approach would be something like this. There is on top this workspace switcher, which tells you which workspace you are on and what is the moderation status of that. So the orange core in this example is that it's in review. So there is this workspace switcher where you can either switch directly between workspaces, or you can search for a workspace and then switch. You can update your workspace, and from the workspace switcher you can moderate it, get a moderation page. So this shows you, this is a detail of a workspace. It shows you the moderation status of that. You can change the moderation status, shows you some metadata, and it shows all of the workspace changes. So all of the items that has changed or does not yet exist in the selected upstream workspace. Let me just go home from here. This will be the quickest way. So when you hit deploy, you have to, this is basically the same as a commit message, title, description, and deploy to live. So first, what it does, it pulls changes from the upstream, so updates your workspace, checks for conflicts, and when it finds conflict, it stops and tells you there is a conflict. You need to resolve it before you would be able to continue with the deployment. So you select, and this shows you basically, this is a basic conflict resolution screen, which only shows you a local version and a remote. Then you can select either local or remote. You have to go through all of the conflicts before you are able to continue with deployment, and then it's deployed. So, and in this case, the workflow is set that once it's deployed, the moderation states changes automatically to published, and all information has been has moved to the upstream. So this is the standard approach, I would say. And I was working on other workflow-related issues. One was the save and draft button. So there have been, I created a few options for that, but this is not the major thing. So this could be a two-step or two separate items. For one, you select the moderation state, and then you save. If you don't have moderation enabled, it would basically be just a checkbox. But this wasn't the important thing, I would say. When I was working on that, I was working with the edit page, and I had this idea to sort of reorganize or edit the actual edit page, and I had a few examples for that. So, for example, this is one option where we would move the save and moderation settings to the sidebar, and then sort of regrouped the page settings and menu settings. Also, I was playing a little bit with the manage the administration toolbar, and I sort of had another idea to move the settings, the save, preview, and moderation settings to the navigation bar. And from there, I sort of got into the idea of using outside-in approach for stuff. And so for this whole process of doing workspace moderation, we came up with another example or another way how it could be done. So this is to visualize or to make it maybe easier to understand the concept of workspaces and how they work. And it is inspired by this functionality on Mac, where you launch the, I think it's called, where you basically switch between desktops. So there would be a very similar approach. You click on the workspace switcher, and it slides down. It shows you the information about current workspace. You can update or deploy or change the moderation status from there. And then you can switch between workspaces. And once you see, okay, I want to work with this, with production, I'll just switch with it. And so this is the outside-in approach for switching workspaces. Obviously, the deployment and moderation of workspaces, there is it would work the same way as here. But I think this is a nice approach to working with workspaces.
I think it's awesome. It's almost like it's outside in, because you're getting outside of kind of like the mental model that's created is that you're outside of these sites. The workspaces are kind of like a whole different version of your site in a sense, at least a whole different content version of your site. So you're outside of these different sites, and you're moving from one to the other. Without doing something like that, the user is going to get confused moving between workspaces in terms of which one they're in. That's why I really like it.
So this is what I was working on. If you have any more feedback or comments or recommendations, I will be posting a YouTube video because this is a principal prototype, so I don't have a link for that, but I will create a YouTube video and post it to an issue related to Workspaces UI.
Yeah, I'm curious how far it's like, how far maybe Sam, you could talk to, like, what's the level of effort that would take us to get to something like this? Because I mean, it's beautiful, but you know, there's like, wow.
Yeah, it depends on the context, because there's a lot of ways you could implement it, but just this UI, I think, is possible. I don't see anything that's that crazy, but it's a new, like you said, it's actually not outside in. It's like something new, like even a new level. So that would be the thing you have to implement, is the idea of opening a tray that's actually outside the body content, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, but I don't see anything that would block it. I mean, at the very worst, you could actually use iframes for every workspace until you actually go into it, and then you load the like full content, and that to the user would look similar to this and wouldn't require a ton of technical changes. So
cool. Yeah. Does anybody else have any kind of like questions or like feel like this pattern is not, that there might be things that still need to be teased out about how this pattern is going to work in terms of the user's mental model? Because it definitely is it's very different from anything that we've done before.
Yeah, to me, since I've used workspaces a little bit with Lightning, but I've definitely have more experience with something like Workbench moderation, and seeing both flows in the same UI is kind of interesting, because you can have a workspace called draft, let's say, or stage, to make it clearer, and that can be in a draft, and then the content within that can also be in a draft, if that makes sense. So there's like so many levels of moderation that some of the UIs, like right now it says moderation state draft. If you change that to published, I guess that'll publish it to the live workspace. I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, that's still, I think the nomenclature stuff is still an issue, because if you have draft within the workspace, and then you have a draft workspace, it's definitely going to create, it almost feels like there should be a different level of nomenclature entirely for the workspaces themselves. So we have deploy, which is a good verb for workspaces. And I kind of feel like it's like that the states around workspace shouldn't be draft and published, that they should be, like pre-deployment, ready to deploy, and deployed, or something like that. Just to like completely separate the two, kind of frames of reference, and not have any kind of cross-contamination. Because you're gonna, even as people talk about it, you can think about an editorial team talking about it, and somebody's saying, is that draft or is it published? And the person's like, oh, it's published. But they were one person could be talking about the workspace, and the other person could be talking about the node, or the or whatever it is. So, anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I really like the pre-deployment, ready to deploy, and deployed. I think it's a good point.
Maybe there's something better than pre-deployment, though.
Yeah.
Anyway, we can table the discussion of what the actual names are. But I feel like that, the one point of feedback is that I feel like we should. Sam's point is really good. We should really consider the possibility of these two different levels of nomenclature getting in the way.
Another thing outside of workspaces is, my team was talking recently about how even in Workbench moderation, the Drupal community is so used to draft, needs review, published, that we never like question those terms either. But actually, like if I change the moderation state of something to draft, I'm actually making it not live, like I'm making it not publicly accessible, but that's never clear anywhere at all. And like so there's so many things that we like just assume because they've been that way for 3 Drupal versions, and then you show it to a new user, they're like, oh, I moved it to draft. Does that mean there's like a draft and a live one? It's like, oh no, you actually just unpublished it. It's like, oh no, like people don't always realize what they're doing. So the labels, having the labels be as explicit as possible, or having a tooltip that says, hey, you know, saying deploy means that this is going to go live and it's going to replace your things on your live side, or you know, just as explicit as possible, and then work back from that would be my feedback. So
yeah, I agree, definitely. So I don't think, I mean, given that either approach is going to take effort. You know, the first flow that you showed us, the sort of standard kind of, this is the way we would do this in Drupal.
Yeah.
It seems to me that we should push for this UI and not, you know, do like an interim step and just waste time implementing that. Because this really looks really like the way we should go for this to me.
So what do you think about these parts? So these screens, like the deployment status, and then sorry, I need to get back to stage. Yeah. So this whole message, and then these next steps, should that happen as well in this area?
Yes, absolutely. You don't want to break the mental model of these are actions that I am performing on this entire workspace. It makes no sense from a mental model perspective to have actions that you're performing on the workspace happen in the physical screen space that people are reserving in their brain for this is this workspace. They need to happen outside of it. If that area, right, if that area at the top is not large enough to, you know, to encompass a task that you want to do on the workspace, we would probably need to do something else like just push the page down and give it more space so that you could actually perform that action. But some of those like can be much smaller, you know, and
yeah, I think this is the only example where it would have to be pushed down, because other than that, everything is just yeah, it's on your progress bar, and then some messages.
So,
yeah.
So the reason for the let me just dig on those pages a little bit. The sort of side by side diff comparison on the two things. The reason why the user would need to resolve conflicts is because I made changes and then somebody else made changes on a different. Somebody else checked out the same project and has their own workspace that they've published changes on, and now my published changes are overwriting those changes, or
yes, I would say somebody has already pushed to live different changes which I already don't have, or that changed the content which I'm editing as well.
Right. So doesn't this get resolved? I mean, I think the fundamental kind of problem that I have here is maybe not necessarily with your UI, but more with the function of the tool itself. I thought that those kind of things had kind of like, you know, that those kind of things got resolved by the implementation, by the CouchDB implementation anyway, because it would automatically know, you know, like at what time each revision was done and sort of merge them in naturally. Does that not happen? Or
I'm not sure about it, and it's a really more technical question. So it's probably more for the development team.
Yeah, we should bring it up with Tim Millwood or Dixon.
Yeah, Tim or Dixon.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, we can move on from that. As far as UI goes, I think it's good. I think it works. My only issue, or my only sort of thing that I don't see in the UI that I think would need to be maintained in practice is that you need to lock scroll between the two windows. That's very important, and we should probably show it in design.
Yeah, in fact, I think the whole bottom area should be frozen. Like you wouldn't be able to click on any of the links or anything.
Right. Yeah.
Just click on this to unlock.
Yeah, but what I'm talking about is on the local and the remote versions. When you're diffing the local and the remote versions, if there's overflow in that it's scrolling, which is what I'm assuming would happen if you had a longer page of text.
Yeah,
if there's overflow, the scroll of the two windows needs to be locked together, so that I can't scroll, so that I don't have to go back and forth and scroll each one to maintain my text at the same point. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the only additional thing that I would say for there, that we need to somehow illustrate that the scroll should be locked here, or that the user should at least be able to lock the scroll. Maybe there's a little icon for locking it or unlocking it. But that's like a nice to have. I think by default they should be locked together. But that's cool. I like it.
Okay.
But can you go back to the other one, to the node edit one for just a second?
Yeah.
So Joseph had actually showed me this already the other day before, and it looks like you've done a little bit more work on it since then.
Not really.
Okay.
I was only working on the workspaces.
But so what I suggested to him is that we could use the settings tray here. This is not necessarily, I don't think, Joseph, when you built this, you were just assuming that this would be a column, like a layout column, and not necessarily the settings tray, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like the settings tray module should be, or other people know it as outside in, but the actual module name we changed to settings tray should be used both on the front end and on administrative pages as well in certain instances. And I was suggesting to Joseph that this would be a place where we could use the settings tray. But I feel like we need to figure out what the sort of like, what the types of instances in which you would use the settings tray on the administrative side are.
Yeah. And this was really just work in progress, so nothing finalized.
I think it's a good start, and I think it's going in a good direction. We already, as I pointed out to Joseph, we already have to change, or we already, I should say, we do have to change. So Tim Plunkett has been working on this module called field layout, which is essentially getting display suite into core, really. I don't know whether anybody else has seen it, but basically it enables you to take your form, and make it a multi-column form, or apply a layout to it. So as soon as we have that, the layout work that we did originally for Drupal 8 of putting all of this sort of additional sort of meta content, authored on, published on, etc., over onto that layout column on the right-hand side, we have to undo all of that because now that's completely configurable by the user, and they can move those things around at will. So we should just have the default layout be like a 2-column layout, but then the user could configure it to be something else. But that kind of changes the way we look at a lot of these administrative forms, because now we can set form modes on them and do all kinds of things and create. We could do form modes before, but now we can do layouts. We can apply layouts to the form modes. So that's gonna require some thought, messing around with to get it right. But I think this is a really good. This is a good start for, for what we do with this kind of stuff in the workflow and moderation. Yeah. And I like that. I think we should. There's another pattern here that we've also talked about in relation to blocks, which is the the iOS style on-off toggle. I kind of feel like we need to really. This is one of the things that it keeps popping up in a lot of different designs. So we really need to just, actually build this and make it a standard core thing that people can use. Otherwise, we're going to get 30 different implementations of it. There needs to be a standard base implementation of that toggle in 17. Pretty cool.
One thing I was going to say is WordPress has a really similar sidebar for doing things like setting publication date, kind of like publish, unpublish, any metadata, and it works pretty well. I actually think theirs can get quite messy because there's a lot of tooltips, and like when you click the calendar for their scheduler, that's another modal, and there's all this stuff. But I think you can make it work. I've been working in Contrib on a front end outside-in module for workbench moderation, which I'll post a link to, and it has some of these ideas, although it's quite simple. And now that works in core, it's totally broken, so I have to fix it, but you can use it with workbench moderation. But there's screenshots in the summary of the project, and it just moves like all the local tasks and all the moderation tasks into that outside-in sidebar, so that users feel like, one, their theme doesn't look weird because there's tabs randomly in it, because we had that feedback a lot that theme developers didn't know how to handle local tasks, and then it moves everything to one tray that we can reuse for things like annotations, diffs, revision history, and all sorts of other stuff we want to do. So,
had you seen that already, Joseph, or no?
No, I haven't.
It works pretty well. It's pretty cool. It's got some interesting ideas in it.
Mm-hmm.
So, Joseph, do you think you have enough feedback to go to, so we can move on to another issue, or?
Yes, sure. Thanks.
So just for the reference, the project was moderation sidebar because the group chat is not recorded over Hangouts video. So if I don't say the name, then
there's two modules. One is moderation sidebar, just moderation underscore sidebar, and the other one is moderation underscore note. And they're both kind of teaser projects that my team has been working with to see how we can use outside in to move all your moderation actions into the sidebar.
Mm-hmm. And I will also post links to some of these prototypes to Slack channel.
Thanks, Joseph. Are these in InVision or something?
This is Marvel, and this is Principle.
All right.
So actually, I can post this Principle file into Slack chat.
All right, yeah, because you needed the motion effect to get this shrinking of it. Yeah, that's nice. It looks really good. Awesome work.
Thanks.
So what do we have next, Gabor?
I think one of the media. I think we can move on to the media library, and then talk about metadata.
Okay. So I can share my screen. Can we do it? Okay. So can you see some sort of media library?
Yep.
Okay. So I presented this last week, I think at the other UX meeting. Basically, what I'm working on in the media initiative is the library, and this is both the admin page, like where people will go to administrate media items, and it's also going to be a part of a field widget, which will allow people to use the library to select what media items they want to reference. So this is based on some mock-ups that were made. I forget by what team, and I followed them pretty close, but now I'm running into a point where there's a lot of gaps that need to be addressed. So I'll just go through a demo and then maybe take feedback before I talk about the gaps, just to see what people think off the bat. So this is the standalone page. It's at admin content media. It has a primary local task, just like content. And then it actually splits up your media types into sub tabs. And so right now I'm only going to demo the image one, but if you had YouTube, for instance, you could click this sub tab, and that would kind of filter down this view one level to only show YouTube videos. So I'll go back to image. So below that's breadcrumbs. The add media button is very similar to add content. It just takes you to that page that lists all your types. There's some default views contextual filters that were in the mockup, and the view uses Ajax, so you can type in a name, click apply, and see that there. So I'll remove the filter. And basically your media items down here are represented by a view mode for every media type that either the theme can develop or the module developers in core can provide some default thing in 7 or stable to make these look appropriate as grid items. And so this entire output of each item is fully configurable at a theme level. So by default, for images, I'm just showing the image, which could be cropped to a better image size, but this is it kind of shrunken down. And then there's this attribute section, which is also in the template, which lists the name, a relative time when it was created, and the creator. When you actually want to perform an administrative action, you can click, and the mouse cursor changes to indicate a click, and there's hover classes and such. So you can select multiple items, and then just like all the other admin pages, you have these bulk actions. So this is all default views kind of so far. You can click that, and it'll take you to a new page to finish your action. So this is the library section. So this is basically where admins are going to interact with media. There are mockups that Kevin worked on that I haven't implemented yet because I don't actually know how to visit this, because right now every time you click anywhere, it just selects it. So we're going to make the name be a link to open the media, and we're going to have an edit link here as well. So just before I move on to the field widget, do people have questions or feedback about the library?
It looks good.
Okay. I think there are styling things that I want to do. So we're going to provide media types by default, just like we provide kind of bundles by default of content for the standard profile. So file and image will be here by default, and I'm going to make sure they look good in the library out of the box. And then after that, you know, if people make more types, it's kind of up to their theme developers to ensure that this looks good. So that, I think that puts kind of a maintenance strain on site builders, because this could look really bad if you didn't have like someone who knew how to style content. But at the same time, I think we've seen that like 99% of people are just going to use images. So as long as that looks good out of the box, I think we'll be kind of set.
I think so. As long as the default, if they don't provide any image as a thumbnail, goes defaults back to the file type icon, I think we'll be okay.
Yeah,
and go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that's something I want to implement too. I think I'm just waiting to see how that works, and then I can implement it.
Cool.
So, so this, just to finish up some interesting things about this, I think this page introduces, and actually the field widget too, introduces a new pattern to core, which is like visual selection. So actually using views to render content in an administrative context, that's never really been done before. We almost always have something like a table and checkboxes in the table. So right away, even without the field widget, this is introducing a lot of new patterns that I think are going to be good in the long run, but I could see how in future versions of Drupal 8 or maybe Drupal 9, the default like admin content page could adopt this too. So users could actually see some visual representation, maybe the lead image, title, something like that for their content. So I think it's exciting long-term for other people.
I think it's great. I think, yeah, it'll definitely be very useful.
So now I'm moving on to the field widget, which didn't have a lot of mockups behind it. So this is a place where I'm looking for a lot of feedback and maybe addressing some of the gaps I'll bring up. But this is the Node Add article page. And instead of the traditional image field, I've added a media field. And so this is a field widget which right now only allows existing selection. So we don't have the creating new media stuff fully figured out. But for now, I think there's enough to talk about with just using existing. So this is the widget. When you click Add Media, it opens a modal which shows that same view in a very similar context. So in the same way you did in the backend library or in the admin library, you can go ahead and select things. You can filter. This apply button is actually for the contextual filters, so this is a bug I need to look at. But selected items, which is also text I want to change, is what you click to close the modal. So I finished my selection. There's two things. I'll click selected items. And then right away, you see them in the same context using the same styling. So, and then I've added some stuff which had no mockups. So there were no mockups for what selections look like in the field widget. There were some for what they look like with files and images, but media types can be anything. So there may be an upload field or anything like that. So there was no mockups for this section. And then, so I kind of made assumptions that, you know, if users are used to interacting with media and have styled it to look like this, they may prefer that style to persist after the selection. So I chose to basically use the same styles here. And because this is not a table, which is what every other multi-value field uses, I've also added jQuery sortable support. So when you hover here, you get the move icon in your cursor. We could also add an icon to indicate that or text. And then you can reposition them just with sortable, drag and drop. And then beyond that, there's a remove icon in the top right. This also had no mockups, and I'm using a core icon. So totally open to interactions ideas here. But if you click that, there should be better progress, and then it removes it. And you can keep going back to the modal, and basically every time you open this and choose something, it appends the selection here. So you should see two new guys. Probably they should go last, not up there, and then you can resort them. So this is all new. There's so many new patterns here. So many things the core has never done. So if there's any feedback at this stage about styling or about what we're trying to accomplish, it'd be great.
I think it works really well. I think I'm pleasantly surprised at how good the icons look just coming in the same way that they're styled for the page itself. Some people might consider them to be a little big, and people may want to, and we may at some point in the future introduce another image style just for this context. But I think, you know, as a minimally viable solution, this is great. And the one thing that I did have a comment on is the icon styling for the remove. And when I see the icon styling for the remove, it makes me kind of rethink what I put in the issue about the check mark icon, because because we probably do want to give the icon the semantic red, but it's dying against the images the way it is right now. So I kind of feel like the original mock-ups that showed the icons in a circle, that approach might be better in a lighter circle. So, but what I would suggest is that what we can do is we can use the semantic color, but we can use the semantic color in the icon itself and not the circle. So in other words, you would have white circles in the upper corner with a red X in them. And then in the context of the selection on the library page, you would have white circles with a green check mark in it. And I think that that's going to be more consistent and easier to read and understand from place to place. Certainly, like obviously that one in the middle, yeah, I can't see the red X at all. It's very hard to see the red remove icon at all. So we need to have some kind of separation, and I think the white box or the white circle might be the way to go. I can mock that up. And then we don't have to add, we don't have to have an icon with a circle. We can just take the existing core icon, which is colored anyway already with the proper colors with the SVG, and just stick it inside of a CSS circle, which I think is what we already do for contextual links anyway. So we have.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I see what you mean. Was there any other feedback before I start talking about other gaps, I guess?
This is not feedback necessarily for you to implement or really for this, but you know when you click Add Media there, like click Add Media again, and a little Ajax thrubber appears to the right-hand side. I just hate that, and I would love to be able to take that code that we just wrote for place block, where we have the Ajax thrubber appear in the middle, and the text disappear or the icon disappear, and do that here too.
Yep.
Yeah,
but that's a global kind of Ajax behavior thing that we need to work on. Not necessarily specific to this.
So the other thing is Keith says in the chat that his mic is busted, but he's wondering if you were saying that edit links were shown on hover only there in the, I guess, the admin media library.
Yeah, I think that's true. Is that it is true? Is the question about like touch devices?
Yeah, probably that, and probably discoverability as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like a user may visit this page and not realize that they can. I think the hover action indicates that they can click it, but they don't know to move their mouse there, I guess, the first time they visit it. So.
Right. Yeah, and then so there's discoverability, but there's also accessibility. I would say that this is a really good point. So for the accessibility thing, they're going to need to be tabbable, obviously. The user who tabs through Tabbing Manager is going to need to tab through them one by one, and then when they are tabbed to, they need to also get the same hover state. So that's like that's a code hurdle that we need to get over. But Keith, I think, makes a really good point that there's no visual affordance on the images themselves that you can interact with them. And I would almost want to say that we might want to put like not a disabled, but an unchecked, like so. A circle with a kind of a grayed out check mark, and then the click gives it a green check mark or something along those lines that indicates that this is a clickable thing, or a hoverable and a clickable thing. And I don't know. I think that might be, we might just need to test that. It may be that people get it. People just, it might test perfectly fine.
Yeah, I mean, in other CMSs like WordPress, for example, they don't. It's very similar to this. So basically, you're only like aware of the interaction on hover. That doesn't mean they're doing it right, but I think that pattern has come to be expected, especially in stuff like operating systems. When you visit when you open Finder or Windows Explorer or whatever you're using, you don't know that things can be clicked, but you've been using computers so long. I think we all just share that knowledge. So yeah, I feel mixed. I feel like people should be pushed to hover on this part of the page, because especially actions like edit and knowing that there's more contextual information kind of hidden from them is important. But yeah, I'm not sure at this stage what the best way to do that is. So.
Right. There is also, though, another touch event problem, which is that because it's a dual hover, that you hover on the image and then you hover, and what we're contemplating is the hover on the name to the image name will open the link for you to be able to actually go and edit the image itself.
Yeah.
You need on tap on a touch device, and probably on both click and tap. So if I select one, right, now hover off it. That should not be the behavior. If I select one, the image information needs to stay there for touch devices, because if I don't have hover, if I tap it, I need to pull up the image information, so then I could go to edit it.
Okay.
Yeah. So the selected ones need to have the image info, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree on all feedback so far, and getting new icon mockups for the stuff in the top right will be good.
Yeah, I'll do that.
I wonder, in your mockup, Kevin, of the edit link, it's next to the name, but now it seems like we're putting actions up here in a few different UIs. So I wonder if the edit link should be there too.
Maybe it should.
Yeah, just to consider when you're making the mockups. But.
Yeah, I think that's something that we maybe need to test also.
Yeah, I just wanted to show you one other example. How maybe we can get some inspiration from. Not sure if you are using Marvel app, but the way that, by the way, one nice touch would be to add this slider to zoom in and zoom out the images. But so when you hover over there, you have the big edit, and then there's a small trash, but the name and the meta information is always visible. So maybe this would be also helpful for touch devices as well.
It could be. It could be. The problem in
select like this.
Yeah, yeah, that's nice. The problem in Drupal is that we don't know how many other fields people are going to add to their information. So, and different ones could have different amounts of information. So what I'd be concerned about, and I think what we've had a problem with before in these types of UIs, as they've been implemented in Contrib, is that different items that have different sizes or different amounts of additional information render to different sizes on the screen, and all of a sudden you've got a really messy looking kind of array of stuff that's very difficult to scan through. That's one reason why I like hiding it away. Maybe we could do something that's kind of a hybrid, where the name is always visible, or the additional information needs to be hovered over. I don't know. I kind of like the way the implementation is done. I feel like what we should do is we should plow ahead with the way it's designed, and test it. And if we run into an issue and it doesn't test well, then we'll know we need to revisit it. Because a lot of work has been done already, and it's kind of it's near a point where the actual sort of patch could be really tested on end users, and we could get some good feedback. There might be something, and actually, in fact, there might be some other more pressing usability problem that we would need to handle, which actually we were going to talk, and now we've got like only 6 minutes left in the call, but I do think we should bring this up, even however briefly. Sam, can you go back to the main library UI? Just a second. Yeah. So this was the other sort of thing that I mentioned about the categories when we put together the agenda today. On the using the secondary tabs as the categories, as the pre-filtered categories, there's a problem with that I totally did not realize. I entirely overlooked this when I reviewed, and also I think when I tested the prototype, which is, and this was pointed out by Gabor, which is that because I wanted to add another tab here to the secondary tabs for files, I wanted to move the files from the primary tabs into the secondary tabs, and Gabor pointed out that, well, that's going to be confusing because all of the secondary tabs right now are filters, and now you're going to have one that's files, which is just a totally different view. But that's a problem in general because any module can add something to the secondary tabs, and you're going to run into that exact same issue where some of the secondary tabs might be preset filters of the view you're looking at, and then others might be something entirely different, an entirely different UI. This is something that we really need to deal with, and my suggestion is that we back away from making them secondary tabs, and that we either render them in a different way, just render them not as secondary tabs but just as another kind of a list of links, or we in fact use some other kind of method to pull up these different things, like a select list or something like that, or select to was my suggestion, but we don't have that in core, because the secondary tabs is going to prove to be problematic.
Yep, and there's actually a technical reason to do that too, because to do what you're saying and render them differently, because when you open this add media modal, there's a few things missing that are in the mockup, and one is we don't have those tabs, and the reason we don't is what's in the modal is not a page. This isn't an iframe. It's embedded content. And so you can't really just randomly render those secondary tabs in another context. Like Drupal just doesn't work that way. So we would have had to re-implement them anyway to have them work here, especially with Ajax also. So that would have had to been done at some point anyway. So yes, I agree.
Yeah. I mean, we could do like a kind of a poor man's select to, where the user uses Drupal, where the default ones are there by default, but they have dismiss X's on them, and you just, when you click them, they hide again, or they go away. But then the user can use the standard views form to create new filters, and then they just get added and rendered as little pills that you can remove again if you want to, and then you're just calling the reset function through the existing form, through the existing views exposed form. I would love to actually get select to in here, but I think it wouldn't be too difficult to actually do something where we create dismissible pills for different filters or tabs without necessarily having select to. What do you think of that, Sam?
Yeah, I haven't used select to, but I assume you'll still see them as tabs and you can click them on and off. Is that what it does? Or
Yeah, it's just like Chosen Library. It's another alternative to Chosen Library with where you can have dismissible pills for certain types of things. It's often used for tags, things like that.
Yeah, I think that would be great. And one thing that's not in any of the mockups, because this is like a new pattern in core, also is that media items that are images can have fields that are more than just the alt and title text. So you could actually have this work kind of like a light dam, in that your media type for image could have a tags field, and you could actually tag them with metadata and then search them in this expose filter. Now, I don't know if core should provide that by default, but I think that's worth presenting to users, because I mean, I don't use media that much, so I'm actually a weird person in the project. But I'm always learning stuff, and when I learn that, I'm like, oh, okay, so these sort of views can actually work more like a dam, where you can search images by more than just their name. So I think that's another thing that would be great to have, that sort of to functionality. So
yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we're kind of out of time. This has been awesome. Yeah, that looks so good.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the feedback so far, and I think we're moving a lot faster than people expected. So what my plan is in general for this is to just get this existing selection right and get it looking how everyone wants, and then move on to the parts of the mockup that aren't implemented, which is like, in this modal, you're supposed to be able to create new things, and that is not done right now. So, but I want to table that and maybe just say, let's get this part working great, because this is a brand new kind of like pattern for core, and then we can move on to crazy stuff. So,
yeah, it's awesome.
Thank you.
So you want to wrap it up, Gabor?
Yeah, I don't think we have time for the mapping UI anymore. But Janis is discussing that on the issue as well, so I think we can continue there.
Oh, Janis made a comment?
Yeah, he made some comments, yeah.
Okay, great.
So I think we can continue there. And if there's nothing else for next week, I'm sure there's going to be something about media next week as well. So, so let's keep that going. One thing that I would like to say for the sake of recording is there's a core sandbox that contains all the media patches all together applied. And although I could not make it work right now, it will hopefully be fixed and will be able to work. And that's drupal.org/sandbox/rsam, which is the username for Janis, /2838118. And that will be tweeted, I think, from the Drupal UX account and from the Drupal Media account. So if people cannot type it in from audio, that's understandable. So that can be used to check out all the media patches at once, the media module, the image file, and remote video support, field formatters, and file field widgets for media entity, and the media library as well. Everything all at once. All right, so that's it for the meeting today. We are 2 minutes over now, so thanks everyone for coming, and see you next week.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.